got to look to the future and beyond. What is the potential for them if they continue to go and do good things at their current situations? Let's start with LSU. The stock for me for LSU, if I were to put it into a phrase, is for better or for worse. And for LSU fans, that's what you should be saying to Brian Kelly. For better or for worse, we are bought into your way of doing things. I said it on a previous live show, but what 2022 was for LSU fans and Brian Kelly, it's the equivalent of getting your wife a car the first year of marriage for Christmas. It's great. I mean, they're fired up. It is phenomenal. They weren't expecting that in the first year at least, but now when you look to future Christmases, for future seasons, for Brian Kelly and LSU fans, anything below a car will be a little bit of a disappointment, right? Like, he set the bar extremely high. And that's not to say you shouldn't have done that in the first year, but if you look at the over-under win total in Vegas, Vegas had LSU pinned at 7 wins. That would have been an improvement from what they did the year before in 2021, before Brian Kelly got there. Instead, they win double-digit games, go to an SEC title game. You bought him a car the first year. That's great. But what I would say is there was a lot of people that had some thoughts about Brian Kelly. He's not a fit. He's got a fake Southern accent, all these opinions about him and how he would or wouldn't fit at LSU. I think he dropped the mic in 2022, made it very clear he is a fit, doing what he did with a lot of freshmen on the offensive line, getting Jane Daniels to play exceptional towards the second half of the season, elevated his play a ton. A lot of that, I think, is credit to the conversation they had after the Auburn game. But what else were people saying about Brian Kelly? Why won't he work again? He doesn't want to recruit. He can't recruit. Well, they got a top 5 class in the 2023 cycle. Another mic drop moment for Brian Kelly. And so why I say for better or for worse for LSU fans is next year, if you win 8 games, I've said this before, it's okay. It is okay. For better or for worse, you are with Brian Kelly. Do not be upset if you get a sweater next year for Christmas. Still good. 8 wins is still phenomenal in the SEC. I mean, last year in year 1, they won double-digit games, but I think 4 of those were decided by one score. They were 3-1 in one-score games. Like, that's a very big deal. Those could have gone either way. Credit to Brian Kelly and his way of doing things and their culture for being able to get them over the hump in those one-score games. But I'm just saying, for better or for worse with Brian Kelly, he's proven he's a winner. He's won something like 75+% of his games over the course of his entire coaching career. He is a winner. The way that he does things works, and he's getting good players on the recruiting trail to come to Baton Rouge. For LSU and Brian Kelly, for 2023, you should be excited. But regardless, for Brian Kelly and LSU, it is for better or for worse. For Oregon and Dan Lanning, I think they're a sleeping giant. More thoughts on that in a second. Make sure you're subscribed. Shout out to the podcast, man, on Apple and on Spotify. We love y'all for tuning in. You got a lot going on. And so some of y'all are listening at work. Some of y'all are listening while you're babysitting. Whatever it is, we appreciate y'all, man. I say it all the time, but if you're listening to the podcast, you are really about that life. So thank you for that. Now, like I said, for Oregon and Dan Lanning, I believe wholeheartedly they are a sleeping giant. Let's look to just 2023 for a second. There's a ton of reason to be excited. Bo Nix said 1 more year. I ain't leaving. Leo DiCaprio's season is still on and popping. He's back to do some really good things in 2023. Like, he's not back just to help his draft stock. He's back to go and win a Pac-12 title. And think about the way that we talked about Bo Nix when he was at Auburn. There's all these questions about, could you win with him? Could he be consistent for you? And then last year he goes out and is in the Heisman Trophy conversation. So he's back for seconds at Oregon. And Dan Lanning took inventory of what needed to happen at Oregon from a personnel standpoint, and they went into the portal and got themselves some players. The defensive side of the football is really what it comes down to for Oregon. Can you be more explosive in the offensive side? I didn't say more explosive. Can you maintain that explosive approach offensively, and can you get better and limit explosive defensively? Because the secondary wasn't good. You know that. I know that it wasn't good. So if they can just keep the lid a little bit tighter on defense and Bo Nix comes back and plays the way he did in 2022, like, it's going to be a good time in Eugene, Oregon, man. I'm telling you, they're going to be a player in the Pac-12 title race. You already knew that, but just to keep it a buck, Now it's on record. Oregon will be a player in the Pac-12 title race. So that's 2023. Let's look to the future, though. Why are they a sleeping giant? Oregon's always had branding. Oregon's had a couple of good coaches come through there. Why are they a sleeping giant? Well, here's the reason. They have elite resources. Nike, Uncle Phil, ever heard of it? So they're going to be a player there. They have elite recruiting. Dan Lanning comes from the Kirby Smart coaching tree. They prioritize getting Jimmys and Joes. Okay, Dan Lanning has been to work. He came on this show and he made it a point to say we have to recruit as well as anybody else in the country, and we have the ability to at Oregon. They finished with a top 10 class in the 2023 cycle. They got themselves some absolute program guys, Mateo Uiagalelei being one of them. They're going to build their operation like an SEC team. And that's a positive thing if you're Oregon fans. I know the Pac-12 has a certain feeling about the Southeastern Conference, but here's the deal. You got a coach that came from the SEC. You have a coach that has been on national title-winning teams, has been a part of a national championship-winning defense. He knows how to build it. He knows the formula, and he's working to do that in Eugene. Like I said, the difference, you got the resources and the buy-in around your program to get it to where it needs to go. And so for Oregon, I am excited about what they're going to do in the future. I'm very, very optimistic because, like I just said, the elite resources, elite recruiting, they are a sleeping giant. And think about it this way, too. Guess who leaves for the Big Ten in a couple years? USC, UCLA. The way that I see that, that's two less problems we would have to deal with if we're Oregon. That's a couple less people that we got to play against. And in the world of the expanded college football playoff, where it sounds like the Power Five is going to get auto bids for each conference, I'm looking at Oregon and I'm saying, okay, Oregon and Utah, likely going to be a routine date for the Pac-12 title race. What does that look like? So Oregon is without a doubt a sleeping giant, recruiting as well as anybody else in the country. Dan Lanning, expect him to continue to be puffing some stogies on signing days in the future, all right? We appreciate him for that, man. That was an absolute blast. If you haven't checked out that interview with Dan Lanning, go and check it out after this live show, obviously, on the On3 YouTube channel. Now, for Florida, what's the stock for Florida? For me and Billy Napier, I think the stock is that they're currently loading. Like whenever you're waiting on your software or your game or whatever it is to eventually take shape, it's loading. And for Florida, it's like it's been 13 games. The situation Billy Napier inherited wasn't sensational. It's okay to not know what they are right now. And I've beat that drum a couple times. I'll beat it again one more time, like Michael Jackson. 13 games. It's way too early to even know what Florida is right now. I think it comes down to two things this coming season for them. Can the offense be potent enough? Not can it score 40 a game? Not can it be just the pace setter in the entire SEC? Can it be potent enough? And can the defense have real improved depth? What we're hearing right now at a spring camp from the good folks at Gators Online is that there is real improved depth on the defensive line. And remember, that was a big thing for them. First line was great. Starters were great. Starters were good. The depth behind them was not enough to go the full length of the season. And so what I think you got to look at for Florida is there is no part of them a season ago, and probably even going into this year at this point in time, time of us being live right now, and it's early April, there's no part of them that is, quote, completed or a finished product or something where you put the stamp on them and say, yep, Florida's ready to go. They're still trying to piece together their roster. They're still not sure who the quarterback's going to be. They're still trying to instill their culture. Heck, they just got a new DC, Austin Armstrong. Was a DC at Southern Miss, was going to be the linebacker coach at Alabama, and then Billy Napier said, nope, you're coming with me. Come be my DC. Like, there's just so much that's still loading about this team. Can we just let it simmer a little bit? Can we let it load fully? I think you don't know what you have with Billy Napier until at least after this year. And then you can say, okay, the culture's in place. We know what he's got on the recruiting trail. We've got a larger sample size. Don't judge Billy Napier off of the situation Dan Mullen left for him. Both recruiting, roster-wise, depth-wise, do not judge Billy Napier off of what was left for him, because not all situations are created equally when you inherit them as a head coach. And so for Billy Napier, I'm excited about the direction of the team, but to say that you know what they are right now is just absolutely dishonest. Like, you think you know what Billy Napier is at Florida? I believe that that's a lie. Okay, and I would ask you to present more data than just 13 games. So that's where we find ourselves. Because last year had a lot of games where they looked really good, and they happened to coincide with however AR was playing at the time. There's a lot of games, too, where you're like, man, what is Florida doing? I would say this, though. The thing that I was impressed with Florida last year, there was no quitting them. In the day and age of the transfer portal, there was a couple of times where it felt like the wheels fell off for Florida, and you could have had guys jump in the portal. And if they didn't jump in the portal, they could have mentally checked out and said, you know what, we just lost to Vanderbilt. Coach, I'm out, man. You know, my hamstring's feeling a little bit tight this week. I don't think I'm going to play. Like, you know what I'm saying? That could have been the direction Florida would have gone. And I never once saw that. They played Florida State and went back and forth with them, with AR going like 9 for 27, and they fought with Florida State. And Florida State is going to be a top 10 football team this coming season. So what I would say is the culture and the buy-in around Billy Napier, from what I've seen from an effort on the field, I think it's there. But the team itself, the stock for Florida, it's still loading. You just don't know yet. But I think there's still a lot to be encouraged about. So for LSU, for better or for worse, Brian Kelly, we're rocking with you. For Oregon, resources, recruiting, coaching. It's being built. Stay very, very quiet, because there's a giant that's sleeping in Eugene. Don't wake it up. And for Florida, like I just said, they're loading. You don't know what they are yet, but Billy Napier has that thing headed the right direction, in my humble opinion. Hey, y'all, thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also, be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.